Hey everyone, welcome back to the Spot 360. We're going to continue on our interview with Harrison Kern. He has some very interesting insights and thoughts regarding Milwaukee. All right, we're just going to pick up right where we were.
To make it enough of an issue that you're going to get out of your chair and you're going to go down to City Hall, or you're going to go to your alderman, or you're going to go to your congressman and make some noise.
See, I think one of the things that people forget, you can be dissatisfied with something.
Correct.
But if you don't take any action to do anything about it, then who's even know that you're dissatisfied with the issue?
Absolutely.
And people get the idea that, well, going down and voting, that's not going to make a difference anyway. However, they forget, it's like part of making laws or changing laws is getting enough people to see it your way, and then get those people to put pressure on that particular politician to go along with the program. If that particular politician, no matter who they are, if they don't go along with the program, you take your backers and your followers and you find a candidate or support a candidate who will support your agenda.
Absolutely.
That's how it works. When people complain about the police, whether it's a ordinance or whether they complain about how the streets are plowed or how garbage or how whatever the issue is, if you don't agree, there is a process that people can actually engage in to help change it if they want to.
Absolutely. And you brought up something just now in terms of people who claim they won't vote. I mean, people who claim they won't vote because nothing will make a difference or it doesn't make a difference, I have a real bone with. I mean, I have a real problem with people with that mentality, to the point that I'll disassociate myself with them if they continue that way of thinking after we have a conversation. And a part of it is because how do you complain about anything and you are in you're in no way a part of the solution? Interesting enough, for anybody who complains about what voting doesn't mean around here, there's a perfect example in our own backyard. Maybe 10 years ago, don't get me wrong, I might be off by some years, but in an area just south of Milwaukee, in either Oak Creek or Cudahy, I think it was in Oak Creek, the election for mayor came down to a tie, a virtual tie, after several thousand votes. Now, that doesn't happen often, but it did. So here we had a local election in our locality where you had two people vying for mayor, and you had a tie after several thousand votes. There was somebody who stayed home because it didn't matter, who could have made a difference in who was the mayor or not. Now, if we think that doesn't matter, if I'm a mayor and I come in with an agenda and I have certain things that are important to me, those are the agendas I'm going to push. And maybe it was the opposite of what you thought should be proper. So your vote could have made a difference in who's running the city, how your garbage got picked up, when your snow got removed, whatever the case may be.
Who's the district attorney?
Absolutely, all of the above. And so for people who act like it doesn't matter, it's just like, what planet are you on? It's almost to the point that level, you don't want to insult somebody's intelligence, but to me it's such an ignorant position to be that I have no other words for it. And I find it very difficult to speak to someone who insists that that's a way of thinking. And then, some people will argue, well, you have some people who won't vote for religious reasons. Well, you hear there are some religious practices that don't allow for people to vote. Okay. And I have a real issue with that as well. Because at the same point in time that they kind of liken voting to exalting a person like godly, no one says that when you vote for a person that you are in any way doing anything spiritual. All it's doing is saying you prefer one person to manage resources than another person. That's all a person who's elected is doing. Is managing resources of a particular entity. So a mayor is managing the resources of a city. That doesn't mean that he's a spiritual God or in any other kind of way that I go to him and pray, and any other kind of nonsense. Right. So the idea that you kind of liken those in whatever kind of way, twist things to the point that you use that as a reason not to vote is, in my opinion, pathetic. And more importantly, whether you actively vote or not, you are still involved in the political process. For a lot of people who claim that they won't for that reason, they still pick and choose the schools they go to. They pick and choose the communities they live in.
Yes, they do.
And they do that based on the safety of those cities, the safety of those areas, or the services in those areas, which is all politically done. So it's amazing the hypocrisy that whole thing has.
Yes.
So for me, I have a real problem when people have that kind of attitude because it makes absolutely no logical sense. Now, yes, when we can look at things on a national level and we can say, well, yeah, voting doesn't matter because Donald Trump didn't get the most votes and he's the president. Well, that's true. However, we could change that process by putting the pressures on the people that we vote on at the local level to put the pressures on the national level to change what's there. Like, for instance, there has been some talk of removing the electoral college. A lot of people don't understand how it works, but the electoral college is actually who selects the president of the United States, not the actual cast votes. And for us as American citizens, some of us now find that offensive, and we should, because at this day and time, there is no longer a reason or valid purpose to have an electoral college like there may have been a century ago. So the fact that we have to change that is pathetic, but again, it's our apathy and our sitting back and letting the powers that be dictate things rather than people dictate things. And so I have a real problem with us not standing up and doing more. So as a black man in the city, it's sometimes offensive to me to hear us keep making excuses for things that we can technically control and or affect in a great way. Whether it's in education, we could have affected who our district attorney is. I find it very interesting, and this is something that may rile a lot of people, and quite frankly, I don't care. When we look at what we can and what we can't control in this city, it's relatively amazing. When you look at every political office in the city, with the population that we have and the eligible voters we have, we can have a say-so and be at the table in any decision that's made.
Yes.
For years, one of the biggest problems that we've had in the city, whether it's perceived or in reality, is the community and police relations. We've been complaining about how police have serviced the black community or taken advantage of the black community, depending on their perspective, for decades, going back to Harold Bryant. We've complained about it. So you would think that the focus of a lot of things as we go forward would be putting better people in place to be involved in the process, whether it be at the chief's office of who's going to be police chief, who's going to sit on the Fire and Police Commission, who is going to be a DA in the city. You would think that we'd be involved in that process. And as an example, for a lot of black people who are complaining about we're not at the table or we're not doing this and doing that, we had an opportunity 3 years ago, for the first time in my lifetime that I remember, at least, since E. Michael McCann, at least, that we had somebody make a serious challenge to a sitting district attorney. Now, these are the district attorneys that could never find cause to charge the police after a Daniel Bell situation or a Ernest Lacey situation, or whatever the case may be. Obviously, some of those may have been charged, but my point that I'm making is, over these last 40, 50 years, there have been a multitude of questionable incidents involving police and citizens that look like me, who have addressed these situations to the DA, and the DA was very reluctant to see it any other way than how the police reported it. Now, if you're in a community and you're complaining about not getting a fair shake, and you have somebody that challenges a sitting DA that happens to look like you, happens to be from your community, and you don't support them, and they don't prevail, and the same type of DA, who's been the same type of DA for the last 50 years, then renders decisions such as the situation involving, what was the young man that got killed at City Hall?
Manning?
No,
or not the Manning.
Yeah, Manning. Yeah, Officer Manning, involved in Dontre Hamilton's situation. When here you had an officer that shot a man 14 times, homeless man 14 times in front of City Hall, for whatever excuse that he made or whatever claim he made. I wasn't there, I don't know. What I do know is that, in my opinion, based on what I read, and based on being a police officer for several decades in the city, that it was unreasonable in a lot of ways. Now, the police chief felt it was unreasonable to the extent that the police chief fired this individual. Yet that individual had an ability to file a grievance, which he did, and then claimed he was stressed out by the situation and filed a duty disability retirement because of his stress. And this city and the powers that be allowed his duty disability retirement to be granted to the point that now he's getting 75% of his salary tax-free for the rest of his days. At the same time, because he filed for this duty disability retirement before the actual termination could be heard, he was not terminated from the police department, and he subsequently was not charged by a DA who said that there was not enough evidence to file any charges or bring any charges against this officer. Now, what I find very interesting about that is, okay, if you use that as a standalone incident, there's a lot of problems in that to me, personally. There's a lot of problems in the process that would allow this officer then to file for the duty disability retirement after, in my opinion, murdering somebody, and just leave town and do his thing. That's one hand. That's one problem. But now we get to another issue when this same DA that you support, a lot of our black elected officials, a lot of our black known personnel who have for years acted as soldiers of causes for black people and want you to support what they do, publicly supported the DA who didn't find reason to charge Officer Manning in killing this black dude. Now, fast forward a year later, or 2 years later, when we had a situation involving Seville Smith. And in the situation involving Seville Smith, there's a lot of issues with that on both sides. But here you had a young man who made some very bad choices, was definitely in the wrong in a situation that ultimately ended up causing him his life. Now, I have never been one, even as a police officer, to make excuses for what police officers did. As a matter of fact, I myself fought the police department for 18 of the 24 years I was there. So I would never make an excuse because I was a police officer over doing the right thing. Never have, never will. But when I tell you, as a police officer, as someone who is a very black and a very proud black man, there was absolutely nothing that those officers did in the case involving Seville Smith that was either in error or wrong. And I could have seen myself doing the exact same thing in that process. And I say that to say that a lot of people who were the Monday morning quarterbacks or a lot of the black people who just assumed it was another black man getting killed, no. Some of the things that happened because that was the way they were.
There were some serious mistakes in judgment that was made, which, as you said, ultimately caused a person his life.
And we have to deal with that. And as unfortunate as it is, that was not a racial incident. And we allowed black people, or we allowed people who look like myself, to use that as an excuse, as another example of police brutality or racism or anything else, and it was nothing further from the truth in that situation. But the problem is when we all then demanded accountability from the DA. And so to look at us having an election on the 9th and people don't come out and support a person looking like you, a person that was qualified to do this job, and we don't give them the benefit of doubt. And then 4 days later, when there's a shooting, when there's the uprising and all of the incidents that led to Sherman Park, we now want accountability from the DA's office. Now, I just found that it was just unbelievable. 4 days before, it didn't matter enough to you who was in there to make a change, and then 4 days later, we want some accountability. And that's problematic for me, because some of the people that I know in this community publicly supported a DA who then turned around and charged the black police officer who shot Seville Smith in something that was not only proper, but very reasonable. His response to the situation that was in front of him was on camera, it was on film. The DA had it in his possession the entire time from day one. So they knew that this shooting occurred in a matter of 1.5 seconds, 2 shots fired, as opposed to an officer sitting in front of City Hall putting 14 bullets into a homeless man. And the idea that the DA now was empowered to charge this man, knowing that there was no possible way that there was any violation in that particular police officer's actions, but he was a black man, as a police officer, who shot another black man. And so I guess I'm looking at it, is the DA now want credit saying he charges police? Isn't it amazing who he charges?
The first one that he charges.
The first one, absolutely. Happens to be someone that not only was totally correct in what they did, but happens to look like you and I, and somebody could fill a body with 14 bullets in the ground, empty a clip, and you don't have a problem with that. So when we as a community allow those kind of things and say that voting doesn't matter, it does matter. I wasn't at any of those incidents, but even from the surface, something smells very bad to me in those situations. And what's even worse is, as a member of this community, I'm really offended that we don't care enough about our community to stand up and do more and do better. Because a system is designed to maintain a system. And it doesn't matter whether the system is good or bad. Any system.
All right, well, I hope you guys are enjoying the interview with Mr. Harrison
something,
Kern. We're going to pick this up again next week and continue on. Remember, subscribe, recommend to others, and we'll see you next week.